Welcome to General Strike News and Commentary. Today I would like to talk about taxes. Nobody likes paying taxes, but everyone likes living in the USA and having access to all the benefits our taxes provide. It's my goal to make a few points that all working class and lower income people need to have stamped into their minds so they can see how we are being robbed. We are being robbed by private enterprise and the rich elites who have manipulated government to service their enrichment. The major source of taxation for the USA is taxes on individual income. There are two types. One is called federal income tax, and the other is called the payroll tax. The payroll tax is on wages and salaries to cover the cost of Social Security and Medicare. The income tax is progressive, which means the more money you make, the more you pay. The payroll tax is not. Everyone pays the same percentage in the payroll tax up to the first $118,500. In the 1920s, just before the Great Depression, the top tax rate was slashed from 77% all the way down to 24%. In the 1930s, the top rates rose to 63%. Then, following World War II, they stayed near or above 90%. In 1964, the top tax rates were dropped to 70%, where they stayed at 70% until 1982, when they were lowered to 50% and then eventually to 28% in 1988. The top rate slowly rose to 39.6% by 2000, and then it was dropped again by the Bush administration to 35% until 2012, when it went back up to 39.6%. This is a dramatic tax cut that has transferred massive amounts of tax revenue into the hands of the richest people among us. Now let's look at the payroll tax for the common people. In 1970, everyone paid 9.6% on the first $7,800 they earned. Today, the rate has risen to 15.3%. With this increase in the rate, the average worker must now pay the payroll tax up to the first $118,500 instead of $7,800. As a result of these tax changes, we see the tax rate for the rich drop dramatically while the tax rate for the working class rose. In addition, we have a capital gains tax rate of 15% up to $413,000 and then 20% above that. Most wealthy individuals get the bulk of their revenue from capital gains, profits from sales of property or an investment. So while we pay increased rates up to $118,500, which is usually above 100% of our wages, typically we don't make that much, they have the majority of their income taxed at 15 to 20%. We should not argue if a tax is too low or a tax is too high. We should ask, who has received tax cuts and whose tax burden has increased? The tax burden on the rich has dropped over the last 50 years. The taxes on wages and salaries have went up. On behalf of the rich, I would like to say thank you. Now for the corporate tax. The corporate tax rate at its highest point was 52.8% in 1968 and 1969. Right now it's currently at 39%. With an effective tax rate, which means on average what they pay, is 27%. Some companies like GE, Boeing, Verizon, and others pay nothing in taxes. It's estimated that the U.S. corporations dodge $90 billion a year in income tax by shifting profits to subsidiaries, often P.O. boxes, in tax havens, or using stock conversions. Corporations officially hold $2.1 trillion in profits offshore, most in tax havens that have not been taxed in the USA. 50 years ago, the United States government received 50% more tax revenue from corporations as they received from individuals. Today, they pay 25% of what individuals now pay. That is a massive transfer of the tax burden from corporations to you. And on behalf of the richest corporations, I would like to say thank you. The next tax is state and local government. Half of all the taxes we pay go to federal government, and a little less than half goes to state and municipal taxes. Most cities and towns have no income tax, like the tax our federal government relies on. Some states have an income tax, but they don't raise most of their money with the income tax. States use consumption taxes instead. Sales taxes that you pay when you spend your money is a consumption tax. This is considered a regressive tax. They don't take more tax from those who have more ability to pay, like the progressive income tax does. Everyone pays the same amount, but they are regressive because the amount of income a low-wage earner would spend on these taxes is a larger percentage of their total income than that of a wealthy individual. Because state taxes don't take into consideration your ability to pay, they are overwhelmingly regressive. Once you get to the taxes cities and towns charge, they become even more regressive. The reason for this is they rely on property tax. Property taxes are taxes levied on tangible assets like land, houses, vehicles, businesses, and business inventory. These taxes are the same rate no matter if you own a $10 million house or a $20,000 house. The rate does not increase with your ability to pay. They take less of the income of the rich than they do of the middle class and the poor. They are also regressive because they do not tax intangible property, such as stocks and bonds, which is another form of property. For instance, most middle class and poor people have the bulk of their personal assets tied up in their home or vehicles. If you're rich, the bulk of your assets are invested in stocks and bonds. This is another way the rich have shifted the burden of taxation onto us. If you owned a house that was worth $100,000, you would pay property taxes on that $100,000. If you sold that house and took the same $100,000 and purchased stocks and bonds, then you would pay no property tax, even though it's the same $100,000. Property taxes are grotesquely unfair. If a fraction of a tax like 0.5% was levied on intangible property, state and local governments would have a plethora of money into their coffers, eliminating deficits and the need for borrowing. To summarize how regressive state and municipal taxes are, here are some statistics according to itep.org. The bottom 20% of income earners pay 11.1% of their income to state and cities. The middle income earners pay a total of 9.4% of their income to states and cities. The very top 1% earners pay 5.6% of their income to states and cities. So the richest among us pay half the amount we make the bottom 20% wage earners pay. Again, on behalf of the rich, I'd like to say thank you. Now that the transfer of wealth has been shifted from us to the rich, we now run large deficits due to the lack of revenue. Many services have been cut over the years trying to make up for this massive loss in revenue. Here's the kicker. While the most wealthy among us have shifted the burden of taxes onto us, they did something else. Even though they reduced the amount of taxes they paid dramatically, we still get the money to fund our government from the rich. Instead of paying the money in taxes, they now lend us the money, which adds to our national debt. The ballooning of our national debt is a direct result of this. While we run deficits, the government is forced to borrow money to fund the government. They get the money where they've always have, the people who have money. This is one of the most obscene outcomes to this class war, once you understand how it is happening. Not only do they keep more of their money, they lend it to us with interest and then use the national debt as a tool to call for more austerity and privatization of government services. This has been a class war by the corporations and rich who shifted the burden of taxation from them to us. During this time, the elites and corporations have begun a policy of neoliberalism. This economic liberalization takes the form of privatization, fiscal austerity, deregulation, free trade, and reduce government spending in order to enhance the role of private enterprise in the economy. Wages stopped increasing, and as I said in previous videos, the capitalists are trying to crush labor. Means of production have been outsourced to low-wage countries. Now that the corporate state owns our government, they have orchestrated the largest transfer of wealth from us to them. They've shifted the tax burden onto us and moved our jobs in a constant fight to cheapen labor. While productivity has risen tremendously, wages have been stagnant, sending more money to the wealthy. We need to wake up and begin fighting back. People are angry, but their rightful anger is being redirected by the elites. Demonizing immigrants or other groups is a way the elites distract us from our true problem. With this information summarizing how we are being exploited and robbed, you should question whenever someone tells you taxes are too high and we must give massive tax cuts to the rich, as Donald Trump's plan would do. Estimates by the Tax Policy Center show highest income earners in his plan, who make over $3.7 million, would experience an average tax cut of more than $1.3 million, while the middle income households would get a whopping $2,700. Is there no end to the war? After all the tax reductions I listed, the elites want more. His plan will reduce federal revenue by $10 trillion in the first 10 years, then $15 trillion more over the subsequent 10 years. What these elites do not realize is they are eventually killing themselves. Once they knock out all the footings, their house of cards will come crumbling down. Maybe they think their wealth with all their wealth, they can avoid the collapse. We have over 300 million people in the USA. Once they have nothing to lose, that's when the revolution begins. I know that was a lot of numbers, but this info needs to be burned into your mind. Until you understand the reality we are living in, you will live your life in ignorance, wondering why the world is collapsing around you. I'm General Strike. Thanks for watching General Strike News and Commentary.